And you're very welcome along to a very special edition of OTB AM. It's Jerry Gilroy here. And also with us this morning, we have Owen Sheehan, I presume. Owen, how are you?
Very well, Ger. Any crack?
I'd say the absence of crack is the characterization of exactly where we are at the moment, right?
I thought you were going to say the absence of crack is the crack, and you were going to give us some sort of twee sentiment about creating our own crack.
Okay, we should create our own crack, Owen, as you know, the absence of crack. I mean, it's a glorious sunny morning. Everybody had an hour's less sleep at the weekend, which might have been the worst thing that possibly could have happened for their psychological well-being. I don't know how you felt about that.
I would happily trade an hour's sleep for an extra hour of brightness in the nighttime. That is the one tiny bit of positivity we can take, is that the weather has been actually very good over the last couple of weeks, and it's going to get better. And we are facing into a summer, which may seem like a longer summer than ever, because we might be trapped indoors for the next couple of months. But that is the one tiny sliver of positivity. We're looking to look at a glass and say that it is half full this morning, then that is your nugget of happiness for now. The brightness.
You're a fan of the grand stretch.
Oh, who isn't a fan of the grand stretch? I will say this: there is a lack of the grand stretch aroma in Dublin City. I will say that the grand stretch aroma involves things like it could be unpleasant farm smells. It could be just freshly cut grass. Those two things, you do get freshly cut grass in Dublin, obviously as well, but nowhere near the level you would down at home for anybody who's not from Dublin. So the grand stretch comes with all the sights of the grand stretch, great sunsets, all that sort of thing, but without the smells, unfortunately.
I thought that you were going to say the smells were sweat from the amount of tops that get taken off from the slightly pudgy Irish male who decides, now, the grand stretch in the evening, now I'm taking my top off, like a Newcastle fan.
Well, you see, that usually comes later in the summer, doesn't it? The grand stretch is usually a phenomenon of March into April. And then it's really when the weather, when we have a heat wave, when something tips into 18 degrees Celsius, that's when the tops start coming off. That is the third in the holy trinity of Irish summertime aroma. Yes, it's the smelly Irish male.
Yeah, on the stoops in the ghetto. Can I just ask you, Owen, yesterday we were obviously recording the Classic Game Club, which nearly killed me. It's the 1998 All-Ireland football final, which we're going to get to a little bit later on. But you made the point that this was supposed to be League Sunday yesterday.
Yeah, it was actually. I was kind of thinking about this yesterday, or last week, I should say, that our minds would certainly have been focused on something far, far, far less important last week had the world's not been challenged by the coronavirus at the moment. And it was supposed to be League Sunday yesterday. It was going to be a glorious day for football. It was going to be a big enough weekend of sport, actually. But what I can look at, I think I saw, I saw someone from the Kerry Man, I think, tweeting about how in an alternate universe right now, David Clifford has just scored a 74th minute winner in front of 50,000 people in Croke Park against Galway in the league final. That's what yesterday was supposed to be. Like, I'm sure I'm not the only person in thinking, oh, this is the weekend that was supposed to be on, just to try and take your mind off things at the moment. But that was it. Like, that's actually one of the interesting things, is that I think the passage of time is still happening unbeknownst to ourselves at the moment. That all of a sudden, the clocks have gone forward. The grand stretch, as we've said, league final Sunday was supposed to happen yesterday. I think I'm not sure. Do I just speak for myself here? When the semi-lockdown happened a few Thursdays ago before St. Patrick's Day, I kind of put a pause on life at that point, and I put a pause on the passing of time, where actually in the background time is ticking away, and all of a sudden it's going to be like, well, the championship was supposed to start this weekend, and all these sort of summer events were supposed to start this weekend, and that's sort of a weird thing to be thinking about. But yeah, like, I think when it comes to GAA, it's like, will that competition that was supposed to end yesterday ever get concluded? I certainly have my doubts.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like the league is going to get concluded, but there is some hope, I suppose, is the right word to use. Miguel Delaney had a massive exclusive yesterday about what the Premier League are thinking about when it comes to perhaps potentially finishing the existing season that we're in at the moment. And the details of that are beginning to emerge. And it turns out that they aren't the only league that are thinking about doing this. The Germans are thinking about doing something similar. And the plan seems to be very simple. It's to cocoon as many people as are required to play football every single day for how long it takes to finish whatever amount of games are left in the Premier League season. And they would do this in a couple of venues, one in London, one in the Midlands. They would secure certain hotels, and there would be a match every day behind closed doors, but on TV. And it would obviously happen in June and July. The caveat to all this is that the curve in the UK will have to be flattened. There'll have to be a point that they reach where the testing has reached a tipping point where they're clear and they're confident enough that this could happen. But on the face of it, is this idea so crazy that it might just work?
Possibly. I think it was going to. I don't think this is too dissimilar to something you were chatting about really in the last couple of weeks, that if we accept that there was too much money in football for it to not reach some sort of conclusion, then it was always going to result in something like this. And I know this is a report in the London Independent. There is no official line from the Premier League just yet, but you'd assume that it is something on this level of madness that has to be considered for anything to go ahead. Now, there's a couple of things, and it's mentioned in Miguel's piece. First of all, you would have to have seen proper data that the curve has been flattened in the United Kingdom, that there is less of a threat from COVID-19 than there currently is. Whether or not you can actually get that level of assuredness from scientists and from medical professionals in the next couple of months is still very much remains to be seen. And I think it's actually a little bit fanciful that you might be able to get that in, say, the next 2.5 months, because it's not just the process of playing these games from the moment of safety. It's a moment of safety, and then you can start planning this, and you can start quarantining people. You need to test everybody. You need medical professionals there. In the piece, it's mentioned, what if somebody does their cruciate and needs to go to a hospital? Will they be safe? There are a multitude of different questions that come with this, not least the one that if one person gets infected, that is a domino that would collapse this entire thing. So is there answers for those questions? Well, I'm not sure there is. I'm not sure, can you actually go ahead with something that has that risk of one person gets infected and the whole thing is done? It just needs to be unbelievably stringent, and the amount of staff you would need to carry out something like that is huge. And the UK can't afford to dedicate any medical staff to something like this at the moment. They will be able to dedicate medical staff to other things eventually. Like, what are we thinking here? June, July? I just think even the idea of June at this point, like, we're in April now. In 2 months' time, will the UK be able to dedicate medical staff to something? I'm not sure. Like, if you're talking about July, August as a mega league, and then starting next season up in October, perhaps that's more of a realistic prospect. But it is mad. It's like you're talking about like World Cup style camps, but there would be quarantine camps basically where all your movements are very much controlled. You will be in isolation, as you say, cocooned, but with your teammates and with, I would imagine, a controlled number of staff.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it seems to make a lot of sense. And certainly I'd say this is exactly what the NBA must be thinking about, where there are much smaller teams of people that you would require. You can have, pardon me, local broadcast technicians and local announcers who are quarantined and who might be happy enough to go in and do a month and then come out for a month and then get somebody else going. So, like, you can begin to see ways that some normality might return to the world of sport. And just given that the smallest, silliest videos at the moment are all doing 6 million views on Twitter, the appetite is out there for people to watch a bit of live sport.
Well, without question. I think that when you talk about the fact that this is going to be a financial decision, that there are television companies who paid huge swathes of cash to actually screen the Premier League on their TV, well, if they get something this summer, if those television companies get some football on their channel this summer, you might imagine that the ratings could be bigger than ever. So absolutely, there is a thirst for it. The NBA, as you mentioned, could be another league that has the possibility of doing this, given the small numbers. Like, there were just so many questions about this, and like it's just interesting to see how the Premier League even approach this on a PR point of view, because you would need to make movements on this pretty soon, and to say, and to allow it to be a fluid thing. Is it a little bit of a tense subject to be talking about now, because you do have to get medical professionals to sign on the dotted line, right? Or you do have to get people to actually ensure that they will be in certain places at certain times in a few months. Is that just a little bit of a sensitive topic at the moment in the UK? I would have thought it is. Like, how late can you leave it before you organise it is what I'm wondering.
You can build contingency plans, right? So all of the clubs have their own medical staff. There are, I've no doubt, plenty of hotels that would be interested in being involved in this. The venues themselves should be easy enough to fix and sort out. So you can make the contingency plans, and that's actually the job of the people who work in the Premier League, to try and come up with a way of saving last season and saving the, Miguel uses the word pyramid, I think, to talk about the German clubs. And like, that is the top of the pyramid that the money that the rest of English football requires to survive is going to come from. So, look, this is not important, right? This is where that goes without saying. However, some form of normality returning to life in the form of football, where they find a way under the current circumstances to inject a little bit of normality back into people's lives, might be something that we could look forward to. Again, the UK is going to go through a fairly horrific time over the next couple of weeks. And at the end of that, it might be absolutely ludicrous to be thinking about this. But in the meantime, this story broke last night, and it's a brilliant bit of journalism from Miguel to get the story. And then also to just to back it up by the fact that this is also being considered in other leagues around Europe. That perhaps this is a model that might be used. And here's the thing, Owen. It's possible that this might be the model for next season, that it doesn't work this time at all, but that in September and October and November, this is how football is played, and that last season is completely wiped eventually, and a decision is taken that next season, this is how they're going to play. And this might be what the future of football looks like until a vaccine is found or herd immunity exists for various countries. Like, how is European football going to come back? How does the Champions League come back in its current guise with the way that the situation is so fluid across Europe?
Yeah, it's an interesting point of view, because who knows how long you might have a few weeks of, I don't know, like you talk about flattening the curve, but does the curve get extended? Do we have automatically a society that is COVID-19 free? And there is science out there to suggest that will not be the case. Like, it's interesting when you think about the perhaps power play that this is by the Premier League, that they realise that there is other competing interests in the world of football, not least the Champions League, as you mentioned. And so I think they probably realise that the Champions League faces a far more complicated task to actually get things back underway. Not least due to the fact that they now face a PR catastrophe in terms of what happened in the Atalanta-Valencia match, which scientists have called as Game Zero almost. The Champions League need to be unbelievably careful before they come back. But kind of similar to how Roland Garros have said, yeah, we're going to take September in tennis. I wonder if the Premier League are almost getting this out there now to ensure that, you know, we've got the summer. Don't you dare step on our patch, UEFA. Even though the European Championships is supposed to be your thing this summer, we've got to get our club seasons finished first of all. And to be honest with you, I think that kind of makes sense. I think countries will be individually able to take control of what they organise sporting-wise before a whole continent will. I think the Champions League, that's got to be scrapped, doesn't it? I think
maybe. So look, let's play out exactly what you just said here. We'll get into the sports season in 1 second, but the point you're making about individual countries being able to quarantine, could the remaining 8 teams in the Champions League, or is it 12 teams, could they quarantine in a similar situation to this? Would they be allowed? Would governments decide that? So say, and I'm talking here after the Premier League and the German season, say Germany and England and a couple of other leagues do exactly what is going to happen. And, you know, best case scenario, it's the end of June and most of July that they play these games out. And because you can do it really quick. Is there a possibility that after that, in August, you have a tournament of football where it's in one venue and all the teams come to finish last season's Champions League, and then you can take a pre-season break of 2 or 3 weeks and start next season October time? Is that beyond the bounds possibility?
No, if you had uniformity amongst the leagues as well, in terms of a method to finish their domestic seasons, it might be possible, because what you could do then is, after the Premier League tournament is finished, you could say to, who's that, Manchester City, right, you're staying in quarantine, you've got your Champions League, and then you have your special pilots, people who are involved in logistics of getting them to their away leg or whatever, or not even legs. I think legs are out of the question. I think it'll be one location to play off the Champions League. Wherever you are travelling to, everybody who's taking you to that place obviously needs to have been under the same circumstances of quarantine over the previous weeks, to get it down to the minute detail. Like that is the case, right? Like the idea of two-legged quarterfinals, semi-finals are now gone. I think it would be almost a festival of football at this point. I hate that phrase, actually. A straight run-off tournament in some location that would actually do it. And maybe the UK is like the guinea pig for that, where it's like you have this place in the West Midlands that has successfully run off a couple of games over the course of a week, and then maybe as a pre-season to next season, you'd be able to conclude the Champions League. So it's definitely a method that you could see It's plausible, 100% plausible. But I do think that any of the normal ideas out there, like returning to normality, almost seems like the most insane thing at the moment. Like it's almost, as you said at the top, it's so crazy it might work. The crazy things are almost the things that could work better than the normal things because normality seems so far away at this point.
That's the thing, and I don't envy any of the people who are having to make these decisions because there is billions and billions of euros and an industry utterly reliant on something happening, and nothing can happen at the moment against the backdrop of horrific stuff in the news. So let's bring in the sports news from this morning. And obviously, it's dominated by the fact that the Premier League could be set to complete the season behind closed doors in June and July, according to documents seen by Miguel Delaney, the London Independent. This season has been suspended until the end of April due to the coronavirus pandemic. And at a meeting last Friday between the Premier League, the EFL, and the PFA, there was an agreement that they must try and finish the season despite the difficulties. Being reported that the Premier League is discussing the possibility of the clubs playing televised games in isolated camps in parts of England over June and July. Meanwhile, Manchester City midfielder Ilkay Gundogan says if the season isn't completed, it would only be fair to award Liverpool the league title. Obviously, they have a 25-point lead at the top of the table and are 2 wins away from securing the title. Juventus players and coaching staff have agreed to take a wage cut for the next 4 months during the coronavirus pandemic. The agreement is set to be worth around €85 million to the club's wage bill, although an increase in pay would be renegotiated if and when Serie A season is back underway. Katie Taylor's promoter Eddie Hearn is expected to confirm the postponement of the World Champions' next bout later on today. The Bray boxer was due to put her undisputed lightweight crown on the light against Puerto Rican Amanda Serrano on the 2nd of May in Manchester. Serrano unofficially announced the postponement of the bout on Twitter over the weekend. Hearn is also expected to announce a rescheduled date for the world title fight. Coming up this morning on OTB AM, we've done the sports pages for you. So we're going to get into the sports pages for you now. We've got our lockdown lowdown coming your way at 8 o'clock. Dermot Lane's going to join us live from Kerry. I don't know if everybody has seen his Lakewood Gale, which was just aired a couple of weeks ago. But at the end of it, there's kind of this bit where they're talking about what his life is like now. And I think one of the lines is, you know, his day-to-day existence is foraging for edible seaweed and growing his own food so that he can be self-sustainable. And there's almost like a ha-ha element to the narration. Not like that in any bad way, but like, you know, because he's cracked, isn't he, is kind of the subtext. And now it's like, well, what a great idea that was. So that's coming your way around about 8:15. Alan Quinlan talking rugby around about 8:30. And then Classic Game Club, his Galway against Kildare from 1998. The third greatest All-Ireland final of all time. Is that what we decided that was?
Like according to, I think Martin Bertie and the Irish Independent did a list of the greatest All-Ireland football finals ever, and somehow Galway against Kildare manages to come third in this list. So I think he's obviously leaned on the importance of the finals or the context of the finals and the whole narrative around it, because we recorded this yesterday and there is a lot to talk about when it comes to this All-Ireland final, except for the actual football, which is grand, and like Galway are really good to watch. But you could watch any other Galway game from this era and say it's as good, or like, I mean, I don't want to talk about individual performances. Like you've got the Michael Donnellan solo run and all that sort of stuff in this game. So there are, of course, great moments within it. But I just think it's the lore of this Galway team which kind of makes them so special. And the fact that Kildare are in an All-Ireland final within the last 25 years, a novel pairing. So like it's exciting. It's definitely exciting to talk about a Galway-Kildare final.
Yeah, in fairness, it is completely radically different from your Commoner Garden Dublin versus Kerry final. That's the point.
Yeah, 100%. And like one of the things we'll get into later on, like, I mean, I'd be interested to hear from people at home about who some of the greatest lost footballers have been over recent times. Like the qualifier era has allowed us to scratch the surface on some of the stars from counties that aren't playing Division 1, Division 2 football, for example, but they seriously fell through the cracks before the qualifier series is brought in. And even in counties like Kildare, you even had people who may not have stood the test of time. Like the Galway team thankfully does, but there's so many 90s footballers, for example, that just do not have the reputation that they deserve despite their talents, because they could have played for a county that were up against a better county in their province and then got knocked out before the business end of every single summer.
Yes, you're apologising for your ignorance of the great Kildare footballers, though, and that's apology accepted on behalf of the Kildare football nation. The fact that you don't know who these Kildare footballers are, but that we did because, you know, they were our heroes, that's okay. We'll forgive you the fact that you have like so many players who are giving out All-Ireland medals in their change, blah, 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 blah. We heard that story on. Thanks very much.
I am surrendering. The proverbial white flag.
Let's take you to the sports pages this morning.
OTB AM.
We're going to start with offtheball.com. The lead story this morning is about Spurs giving permission to Son and Bergwijn to return home. Heung-min Son is going to go home to South Korea, and Bergwijn's going to return home for the birth of his son. I think Son has been back and forth a couple of times and has ended up being in quarantine on both sides. So I think he's decided to go home for now, which I think would suggest that everybody knows that football is not coming back in just a couple of weeks, and then it's going to be June at the very earliest before any meaningful football is kicked. A couple of other stories there on the homepage for you. We have to use heroes more sparingly. This is the pay-per-view. Vincent Hogan and Kieran Shannon talking about returning medical staff and how sports journalism ends up using the word heroes. And actually, there are genuine heroes in the frontline staff at the moment who are risking their lives for our safety. And maybe we should elevate these people in our society a bit more than we do. Certainly that seems to be the case, and maybe we're all going to change a little bit after this. Other sports, Tokyo 2020 set to start exactly 1 year later. This is the first report coming through. Big debate going about whether or not we might have a spring Olympics, or if you can just knock it back exactly 1 year, keep all the bookings. That would obviously be the easiest thing to do. Kick it back a single year by the calendar. You change the 2020 to 2021, and everybody goes, "Oh, okay, my booking stands for next year." It makes the most sense.
Yeah, I wonder, does the IOC care about other sports? Like, we've never had a crossover really between big football tournaments, which would always be the European Championships. Obviously, I wonder if they thought about a spring competition. Would they have thought that perhaps it becomes late spring and then perhaps spills into the Euros? And maybe they also had concerns about the worldwide appeal of football taking away from television audiences. So maybe that was part of it, that when you get into July and August, you aren't going toe-to-toe with the biggest sport in the world. So I think that makes sense as well from their perspective, but also, like, it's the summer games, no confusion. Let's just do it when it's supposed to be. Everything else under the IOC banner, and I'm talking about the sports and the national governing bodies within all the sports around the world, they will all move for the Olympics. This is what they've all been training for. And I think even for the athletes, it makes more sense, I'd imagine. Like, I presume a lot of them start their cycle from January at the start, or from the start of a season. At least the season kind of feels the same. It feels like a regular Olympic year, and peaking at the right time doesn't seem like this alien concept to do it for spring. It is back to where it normally is.
Yeah, you can literally take the same training regimes and the same qualifying events for people who aren't already qualified, or for events that didn't get the opportunity to do it, and put them back a year. And so it's actually the easiest way for them to make that work. And also, it buys you time. If there's another outbreak in October or in springtime next year, what are you going to do? It's like, well, we can't all of a sudden just have them around that time. So, like, if you're involved in the Olympics, you see the benefit of taking that year and letting everybody else be guinea pigs about what might be able to happen, how easy or otherwise global travel is in the aftermath of this. So there's a lot of things to get into. Billy Joe Saunders' a scumbag is the other main story in the front page of offtheball.com this morning. That's all I'm going to say about that. I'm not going to look that up or talk about it anymore. And a horrific story. Boxer Anthony Yardy's father dies from COVID-19. So you're starting to see very high-profile people who are getting the disease in the UK, which again would suggest that the community transmission rates in the UK are very, very high, and that has knock-on impacts with tragic consequences. So they're the main stories on the homepage of offtheball.com this morning. I've got to do the Irish Independent next, is it, I think? And yeah, sorry, I don't actually have the Irish Indo this morning for you, so
while you're digging out the Irish Independent, I will move on to the Irish Examiner this morning. I always said that if I was a Dub, I'd have been a Northsider. This is Anthony Daly recalling some of his stories as Dublin hurling manager. I was shaking like a leaf with a mixture of nervousness, excitement. That's a new weekly series coming from the Irish Examiner, asking Irish sports photographers to pick their favourite images. Ray McManus is who they're talking with today. And I won't stay at Spurs for the sake of it, says ambitious Kane. So once you do an Instagram live with one Jamie Redknapp, your guard tends to go down. And Redknapp got into the heart and soul of Harry Kane yesterday, revealing that it's not a definite that he will stay at Spurs. So making sounds that I guess have caused a bit of an overreaction, but then again, there isn't a hell of a lot to talk about at the moment. So you can see why it is dominating a lot of the back pages this morning.
That's Anthony Daly's story is about his time as manager of the Dubs, and Michael Carton, who is a fireman with Dublin Fire Brigade, has obviously tested positive for COVID-19, and Dalo's making the point that he's seen Facebook pictures of him where he's back looking well. Big smiley head on him was how he described the picture, but he's got a great story about the Northsiders being the ones who were kind of the spiritual core of the Dublin hurling team, which I think we can all accept that like the North Side is the real heart of Dublin. Owen, as an avowed Northsider now, effectively that's your identity. I know certainly that's where I live, and North Side rules basically.
Well, we all know that myself, yourself, and Anthony Daly are known worldwide really as the Three Musketeers of North Dublin. Anybody exactly who crosses over to Liffey is like, this is Owen and Ger and Dalo's territory. Really, we're always known for this place. We love the place. The Irish Independent this morning, Joe, I've got that here. A picture of a testing centre at St. Eunan's GA Club in O'Donnell Park, Letterkenny. This will be temporarily suspended today due to a lack of specialised equipment. The HSC is hoping testing can resume tomorrow following the delivery of additional testing kits. Players will take cuts to avoid clubs, says Stephen Ward. He admits pay cuts or wage deferrals are inevitable as football clubs across Europe struggle to cope with the financial impact of the COVID-19 crisis. And Mazzara's probe uncovers €95,000 in FAI payments to Delaney's ex-rights. Aidan Fitzmaurice, payments totaling 95 grand, purportedly made from the FAI to a former girlfriend of ex-FAI CEO John Delaney, have been discovered in the Mazzara's probe into FAI affairs. Susan Keegan, who is then in a relationship with the CEO Delaney, engaged with officials from Mazzara's, the consultancy firm hired by the FAI last year to look into the financial affairs of the association. So this is one of those sports stories that will be bubbling along for the next little while.
The Irish Times this morning, they've got their writers to pick their favourite sporting moments, and the headline in Sean Warren's piece this morning is it's a bit like choosing your favourite child. And there's a great picture of Barney Rock, and I'm sorry, I don't know which of the Dublin footballers it is, cradling a ball just like it was a baby. So the headline mirrors up with the photograph perfectly. And so I think he's picking Dublin Galway in the All-Ireland football final. And they're also looking back at the France versus Brazil 2006 World Cup quarter-final with Emmett Malone when a rejuvenated Zizou came alive to oust Brazil. So this was when Zidane basically introduced himself to the tournament properly, because up to that point it was kind of like, what are France actually doing here? How are they getting here? And then obviously ultimately it ends in failure for them in the final when Zidane headbutts Materazzi. But in that game he was at his absolute very best. So that's their two features on their main page today.
Were you at that World Cup final? You were at that World Cup?
I was at that World Cup final. I was actually driving, so I missed the Zidane game and never got a chance to watch it back. We were at the other quarterfinal that day. Was it Brazil? No, the Italy-Germany game. That was the semi-final. So I don't know. I don't know what. I was definitely driving and missed that. So I don't have that memory from the 2006 World Cup, which is really weird. It was like it's that Con Houlihan story of, we went to Italy and missed the World Cup in 1990. You definitely, because you don't get the chance to sit down and watch everything when you're traveling around. Now, the trade-off is you get to go to some of the best sports events that you're ever going to go to. So that Italy-Germany game was in Dortmund, and that was absolutely sensational. Italy win that game. Pirlo was unbelievable. And then saw the final as well. Actually missed the headbutt at the final. So, how well I was watching it, I'm not sure.
I'm sure you can get it back on YouTube, where somebody can explain to you what happened that year.
I don't really understand. Go on.
The Irish Daily Star this morning is locked in and locked out. Locked in is a story there beside Sergio Aguero. Stars face a month alone in hotel when Premier League matches finally resume. And locked out, Loughnane believes 2020 championship is a write-off. He's convinced there won't be any championships in hurling or football this year. Along with the rest of the sporting world, the GA have paused their games due to the coronavirus. And Kane's hint at leaving Spurs, as already mentioned, Harry Kane says that he might not hang around at Tottenham Hotspur forever.
The Daily Mirror this morning, Kane and Spurs exit hint. It's almost like Harry Kane is the only story in town. And then they also have this story, TV reality bites for legends. BT star pundits face no pay because of the virus layoff. So they've got a picture of 3 of the BT stars who apparently are facing into a period of no pay because of what's going on here. And the FA have offered Wembley in the battle against coronavirus. But their headline, it's a good one, Premier in, Prem stars may be forced into quarantine hotels for a month to get the season started again. I did see somebody going, the players never agreed to this. How could they possibly agree to be away from their families for a month? And you're like, okay, fair enough. I understand that this is a hard sell to the millionaire Premier League footballers who are being asked for a couple of reasons. One, to save their industry, and two, to provide their nation with a little bit of, to provide the nation, whatever country they're doing this in. So if it's the German footballers, and the English footballers in England, with the moment of respite from the traumatic news that is it really too much to ask everybody to sit on the couch and go swimming and hang out for a month in a hotel? Is that really too much to ask for a group of people?
Like, it's not actually going to be a Premier Inn. It's going to be wide, sprawling resort. Although, actually, they have mentioned it's going to be the Midlands in England that they will hold this thing. If there is any wide, sprawling resorts in the Midlands in England, I'm not sure that they exist. But, maybe it's the case that...
England as well.
I say that again?
Loads of rich people in the Midlands of England as well, Owen.
True, so they could just perhaps vacate their mansion. Is it a situation where you just say to the players, well, we're not going to dock your pay, or we can undo the sort of damage we might be doing to your paycheck over the next little while, like a few clubs saying that they will dock pay for their stars. So, you learn your crust by going out and playing in a compact fashion like this. So I can't imagine... you can see the complaint. The obvious complaint is obviously it's a story of my welfare here. But if it's a situation where everything's safe and they're like, I don't want to sit in a hotel for a week or whatever, perhaps you might have a little less sympathy, but totally accept that there has to be welfare concerns at the moment about following through with this. The Guardian back page leads with a couple of stories from a new documentary made by Pele's daughter, Legend and Warriors, the inside story on a new film about women's football. Sebastian Coe then, meanwhile, many were in mental turmoil. Coe feared for athletes' health if Olympics delay dragged on. And Harry Kane says scrap season if it is not completed by end of June.
That's exactly the same story in the back page of the London Times this morning. Kane, I could leave if Spurs don't improve, but he also says it's June or bust for Premier League. And boxer's plea after father dies from coronavirus. We've talked about that. Legal tussle over Farah's medical data. This is continuing in the background there. Matt Lawton, the chief sports correspondent of the London Times, is keeping a close eye on what's happening with the Mo Farah situation. We'll update you on that in a couple of days' time when there's a bit more detail.
The Irish News this morning also has that photo from Letterkenny at O'Donnell Park, a makeshift drive-through testing centre. Conor Moyna then, only Call of Duty with Breffni men would take me home. So the travelling bug, according to Neil Loughlin here, has well and truly bitten Conor Moyna since he left Ireland last September. But the Cavan wing back insists the only thing that could bring him back home in years to come is the pull of Breffni Blue.
Okay, I actually don't have any more of the papers on my side. I don't know if you've got any of the rest of them.
Yeah, I'll go through the Sun here. The Sun is my last newspaper this morning. The Irish Sun goes with Kane quit fear, ambitious star won't stay for the sake of it. Premier in, gone with that headline as well. Teams lockdown to get games on. And Sancho can go. So this is going to be something. There's going to be transfer news over the next little while. It's probably going to surround Jadon Sancho. He's been told he can leave by Borussia Dortmund, putting Manchester United and Chelsea on alert. The England winger will not be cheap, as he is valued at £120 million by the Bundesliga club. So that's an interesting one to hold. He could potentially leave, but we'll see how that develops over the next little while.
Just looking up the Telegraph website here, and they're saying that they have an exclusive Newcastle United's £340 million sterling takeover by Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund moves a step closer. So, look, there's been plenty of these stories generally around transfer windows in the past, so we'll wait and see if anything comes of that. And they're also saying that summer rugby is on the horizon as the Premiership presses the reset button. So Premiership rugby, no less than Premier League football, grappling with what comes next. So we'll see what happens with that. Okay, We're going to take a quick break. If you want to get in touch with us this morning, you can WhatsApp us 0879 180 180 is the number. Best place to get us at the moment, obviously, is on Twitter. At Off the Ball AM is the Twitter handle, or at Off the Ball. You're listening to or watching OTB AM. We're streaming live on YouTube. We're live on OTB Sports Radio. Best place to get that is the Go Loud app, or of course you can also get us on your Alexa or Google Home. We'll be right back after this.